to the September 16th edition of the Tennessee World Affairs Council's Global News Review. I'm Patrick Ryan. Today, Ambassador Dick Bowers, Dr. Breck Walker, and I will present the top items in global current events and give you analysis and commentary and tell you a little bit about the Tennessee World Affairs Council. Dick, Breck, welcome. Good to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks.
And Breck, just a side note here. You're coming to us from the hurricane-lashed coast of the Florida Panhandle. How are things in Panama City?
Oh, fine. I'm a little bit east of where most of the damage is being done, and we haven't had much wind here, but we've had plenty of rain. So I'm remaining watertight, though, and still have power, so I'm in good shape.
Okay. And Dick, you're in suburban Nashville. How's things in your neighborhood?
Things are looking a little cloudy out there if I can peek out the window. But the lawn man just came and finished his job, so I'm ready to go.
Okay, well, I'm glad he's done. We won't have any lawnmowers cranking up.
And you're in a cave, it looks like.
Yeah, I'm in the bunker.
Okay.
Printer's Alley bunker here. It's 10 feet below ground level at Printer's Alley, so we look up at the people walking by, but it's an interesting neighborhood. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going to talk a little bit about the World Affairs Council. We'll give you a preview of a few things we have coming up. And the first thing we're going to talk about is tomorrow night, the famous Dr. Breck Walker will be chairing a panel in our Election 2020 series on the foreign policy challenges of Russia, North Korea, and Afghanistan. And as you can see, he's got a terrific panel lined up. Ambassador Christopher Hill, who was Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian Affairs, as well as having been ambassador to South Korea and a half a dozen other countries. Minister Counselor Annie Horsheimer, who was the second in command at the embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan, and went on to be the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Afghanistan issues. And Dr. Svetlana Savranskaya, who is an expert on Russia. The three of them will be on our panel tomorrow night. That's 5:30 p.m. Central Time in our Election 2020 series. Continuing with that series, we have a number of other terrific programs coming up. We have our listing on the tnwac.org/calendar page. You can see who's presenting at those things. We have, again, a terrific collection of speakers in these panels. So check it out, take a look. These are the issues that informed citizens should know about before they go to vote. They should probably be familiar with these things all the time. But as we look at voting in November, it's especially important to be up to date on what's going on in the world. And we're doing these programs in connection with the October 22nd debate at Belmont University, our partner and host, and terrific organization to be connected with. Lastly, I'll mention that we just booked a couple of programs on December 9th. Our World Affairs Council, in connection with several others, are going to be producing a program on the United Nations 75th anniversary with a look towards the future, what's ahead for the United Nations. We've invited Ambassador Samantha Power for the keynote address, and we are putting together a terrific panel. So mark the calendar. December 9th, that'll be an evening program. January 28th, the Korean Economic Institute and the World Affairs Councils of America will be helping us put together a program on U.S.-South Korean relations, looking at the relationship, the economic benefit of trade and investment, especially here in Tennessee, and the full range of issues in the relationship. There'll be an evening program, and there'll be a small group session for business people who want to talk with the representatives of the Korean Economic Institute, the representatives of the South Korean Embassy in Washington, and the U.S. State Department. So mark that on your calendar, another terrific program coming up from the World Affairs Council. So, gentlemen, we've got a lot going on. I will remind people that we are a nonprofit organization. What we do is for the public good. We're not funded by any government organization. So we would encourage you to become members. Go to tnwac.org to become a member or to make a gift. As you probably know from over time, looking at our programming, we do education outreach with high school students. We do international career panels with college students. We have an opportunity to take students from the Academic World Quest program to Washington and meet with elected representatives, think tanks, embassies, and so forth. And of course, we do community programs in person before the pandemic, and we look forward to resuming those. But in the meantime, we believe we're putting out some pretty good webinars here that you all are tuning into or checking out in our archive at youtube.com/TNWAC. So, Breck, Dick, that's what we've got coming up and what we've been up to. And Dick, if you want to lead us through our topics today.
Well, we got three topics, Pat. Number one is going to be TikTok outcome. So corporate buyout of U.S. operations and the role of Trump administration in the TikTok issue. Secondly, World Health Organization. And your title is, We Need a Better World Health Organization. Well, we'll look at that. And third, the Mediterranean. It is really a sea of troubles, and we'll dig into that. So those are our three topics.
Okay, and before we get going, the question of the week. Breck, do you want to share that with us?
You bet. Thanks, Pat. As I say every week, there is a weekly quiz that you can find on the TNWAC website. And if you're a member of TNWAC and you participate on a weekly basis, you can win a monthly prize. And this is one of the questions from that quiz. And the question is, on the heels of the United Arab Emirates' historic decision to normalize relations with Israel, this nation also announced that it would officially recognize Israel and begin establishing diplomatic and economic ties with the Jewish state. And the possible answers are A, Saudi Arabia, B, and D, Bahrain. And the answer will come at the end. Thanks, Pat.
Okay, well, thank you. Time to jump in. Our first topic is TikTok, and that certainly has moved from an obscure application to a centerpiece of U.S.-China relations. And Breck, I think you've got the lead on walking us through what TikTok is and why it's important and what's going on in U.S.-China relations.
Well, great. Thanks, Pat. So as Pat said, TikTok has been all over the international business news for the last, throughout the summer. And as many of you know, TikTok, what is TikTok? TikTok is a hugely popular, relatively recent app where you can post homemade short videos. Now, I'd never been on TikTok. I'd heard about TikTok forever, but I'd never been on it till yesterday. And I downloaded it yesterday to watch it for 5 minutes, and that 5 minutes turned into an hour, and it was great fun. It has dance videos, music videos, jokes videos, crazy stunts, how to do something kind of videos, and of course, my favorite, animal videos. And my single favorite video, in fact, I thought about putting it up here, but couldn't quite figure out the technical requirements for that, but my favorite video was 30 seconds of a hippo eating a whole watermelon, and I really recommend you miss that. So you can watch other people's videos, these short sort of 30-second videos, or you can do your own using the app. It has editing features and so forth, and you can post it up there for the whole world to see. And sort of the secret sauce of this app, why it seems to be so popular, is the 30-second video is a quick watch and evidently grabs everybody's attention. The editing tools on the app, if you want to post your own video, are very easy to work with. And then most especially, there's an algorithm that selects videos. You swipe on this app and different videos appear, and there's an algorithm that watches what you are swiping and how long you watch in each individual video, and then it comes up with the videos that it thinks you most will enjoy. And apparently that algorithm is working very well. And I'd echo what my son says about TikTok, that it has three things going for it. It's addictive, it's fun, and it's addictive. Now, when I say hugely popular, 1 year after its launch, it's one of the top 10 downloaded apps in the world. They claim to have 2 billion downloads worldwide and over 100 million downloads in the USA in less than 2 years. And today it's available in some 150 countries. And the audience started out being a teen audience, just sort of goofing around and having a good time being creative, but it has quickly spread to adult use in how-to videos dealing with politics, travel, a whole host of different things. So there's been a brouhaha that has developed, and the brouhaha is over the Trump administration worrying that TikTok is an impending national security risk. And in particular, US officials are worried that the Chinese government, because it often influences Chinese-based companies, that it could have a significant influence over TikTok, and it's a way for the government to gather information about Americans. US officials worry that the Chinese government using TikTok could build a huge database covering millions of Americans that they could use to infer different things about each of us individually, and even might set up government officials for blackmail and stuff like that. So they're worried that it could be a source of information for the Chinese government. The US officials are also worried that the Chinese government could use TikTok as a way to spread propaganda throughout the world in general, pro-Chinese propaganda, and in the United States in particular. Now, TikTok is owned by a Chinese corporation called ByteDance. ByteDance, of course, says that the Chinese government has never asked it for any information, and if they did ask, ByteDance executives say, well, of course, we would never give it to them. But other countries have expressed similar concerns to the Trump administration and are looking into that. Those countries include the UK and Australia, and India, and in part for other reasons, border conflict reasons, has banned TikTok, although they're the only country, I believe, to have done that. So the Trump administration, worried about this national security issue, on August the 14th, issued an executive order, and President Trump announced that ByteDance, the Chinese company, must sell TikTok to a United States corporation, or in 45 days, the TikTok app would be banned in US markets. It would be taken off our phones, and we couldn't download it anymore. When he announced that, the first group that stepped up to say, hey, this sounds like a fire sale price, we'd like to buy TikTok, or at least TikTok USA, Microsoft and Walmart partnered together and put together a buyout proposal. And this looked like a big political win-win for Trump, because he was roughing up the Chinese. TikTok would continue as an app in the United States, and some US corporation was going to get a great deal. In fact, President Trump said that the US government should get a commission out of this when Microsoft and Walmart closed the deal. But then the Chinese government threw a little bit of a wrench into that by saying that they would need to approve any technology transfers to non-Chinese companies, which of course means this famous algorithm. And the prospect was the Chinese government was not going to approve that, of course. And so that caused Microsoft and Walmart to become a little bit less interested, and it certainly caused ByteDance to turn down their offer. So immediately ByteDance begins searching for a different way out of this predicament, and they brought in Oracle. I think Oracle's a very well-known publicly traded software and technology company. And ByteDance got with Oracle, and Oracle has made a proposal about how to address the Trump administration's security concerns without ByteDance having to sell the company. This proposal was submitted to the US government this past Monday. It was announced today that the committee that looks into this should have a recommendation on it by Sunday or Monday of next week at the latest. And then it's going to come down, it is President Trump's decision at the end of the day. There haven't been a lot of details let out about the Oracle proposal at this point, but in broad strokes, Oracle's going to become a minority investor in TikTok, that it will become its technology partner and certify the security of the app's data, meaning that all American personal information would be put on an Oracle cloud computer infrastructure, and the Chinese government would not have access to that. And then as well, TikTok's promised to move their worldwide headquarters to the US, and they bring 20 to 25,000 jobs with them when they did that. This is, again, President Trump's decision, and he's got a little political risk here as to what he might do. So most folks are betting that he will approve this transaction, even though it does leave ByteDance, the Chinese company, with majority control of TikTok. And they say they think he'll do it because he doesn't want to irritate the $100 million users in the United States who all of a sudden wouldn't have access to TikTok. There has been heavy lobbying by the U.S. companies and executives involved. And at Oracle, the top two executives have been big supporters of the president throughout his administration. So, of course, the Chinese government would still have to approve the deal as well, but this Oracle deal looks like it's probably going to happen. Pat, I hope it didn't run on.
No, that was terrific. I now know everything that I've been wanting to know about TikTok. I'm not sure I'm going to download it and start watching the hippo videos, but it is interesting. So the vulnerability that the Americans are concerned about is primarily mining personal data. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So this isn't a technology that would somehow allow someone to get into our systems.
Well, there have been reports, unverified, that people that, for example, have TikTok on their iPhone, there have been a couple of newspaper reports that suggest that TikTok can access certain kinds, like clipboard information, within one of your other apps and suck that data out. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's mostly overwhelmingly about accessing personal information that you give the app to help it show you hippo videos.
Well, you know, the Chinese government has vacuumed up millions of files on people. Some years ago, there was a hack of the Office of Personnel Management in Washington, and a vast trove of personal data, including background investigations for security reasons of personnel in all, Defense Department, State Department, and all aspects of government, was vacuumed up by the Chinese. So, they've got a great starting point to build an American database, and this stuff is useful for counterintelligence purposes, et cetera, and to find people who are vulnerable, and the espionage aspects are there, as well as probably some commercial aspects as well.
The two other questions it does raise that are sort of bigger picture questions that have gotten a lot of commentary in the press today is what should the United States, or any country for that matter, but what should the United States do, if anything, about technology companies like TikTok, like Facebook, that can really influence our understanding of the world, can influence our view of politics and what's going on. And so that's one of the issues here. And the other one is, and this may be driving part of the Trump administration's concern here as well, is the U.S. seems to be losing over the last couple of decades its global technology lead in a lot of areas. And this also raises the question about how should we as a government and a nation deal with that going forward.
Hey, I would throw out a suggestion, and I'm not getting paid by Netflix to do this, but Netflix has an excellent documentary called The Silent Dilemma that deals with this topic of data mining and why you should care. and what's going on with the kind of feedback loops that can be created once they realize who you are, what you like to eat, or what you like to watch, all that kind of stuff. So The Silent Dilemma, I recommend it.
Yeah, it's an increasingly thorny issue, and one of the major problems that the Trump administration has with China, and that American administrations have had for some time, is the intellectual property transfer, sometimes theft. So you're right. The global ascendancy of technology compared to the former U.S. dominance is an interesting proposition to grapple with. Breck, how would you imagine that, besides the collection of data, the fear that you mentioned is that the Chinese would use TikTok as a propaganda tool? Russia has started TV networks like RT and so forth that try to appear to be not malevolent communications paths. But the way you describe some of these videos, I guess I would need to know more about TikTok to see how the Chinese would insert propaganda into the system there. These are videos created by the users, right?
That's right. But unlike the Russians trying to infiltrate and post false stuff on Facebook, Facebook's got, or is at least trying to figure out strategies that prevent that or remove that kind of false information from their app and so forth. And of course, the U.S., it would be like Facebook being controlled by the Chinese, where you wouldn't have any effort to, thwart these propaganda videos and so forth. And again, as I said, TikTok evidently started out mostly as a teenager sensation, but adults are increasingly finding it useful for talking about how to, do recipes for a particular cooking dish, or how to fix your car, or and as well using it for political reports of one sort or another.
Interesting topic. We'll have to keep an eye on it and see what ultimately President Trump decides to do with this Oracle deal. Okay, moving on. The next topic is the world needs a World Health Organization. Dick, I think that's your area of interest, and you're going to lead us through that this week.
Well, the World Health Organization has been in the news lately, and primarily for two reasons. First, because for many, many countries who lack a robust capacity to fight the virus on their own, it's the first line of defense for them against the COVID-19 virus. And secondly, it's been in the news because Donald Trump is mad at the WHO and has formally announced that the US will withdraw from the organization. He says that the WHO is overly political, that it botched the efforts to control the pandemic, and that it is too cozy with China. So what is this World Health Organization? Well, first, it's part of the United Nations system and is one of 15 UN specialized agencies. Basically, the WHO is responsible for international public health. The WHO Constitution, which establishes the agency's governing structures and principles, states that its main objective is the attainment by all peoples of the highest possible level of health. The organization's headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. It's got 6 semi-autonomous regional offices and 150 field offices. It has 194 member states, including, at least up to now, the United States, which traditionally has provided about 20% of the budget. And about 10% of the WHO staff are Americans, many of whom rotate in and out from the US Center for Disease Control, our CDC. We have been the backbone of that organization since it was established in 1945. And if President Trump has his way, by July 2021, we and our money will all be gone. Now, with the pandemic going on, it seems maybe kind of an odd time for the US to be leaving the world's foremost public health institution. And I think that most WHO watchers think the organization has done a pretty good job in dealing with the pandemic, given the constraints built into the way it works. Nevertheless, the twin threats of Trump and the coronavirus have shined a spotlight on its strengths and weaknesses and raised a lot of questions about its future. Now, it was the WHO that was central in the eradication of smallpox years ago, a disease that killed almost 300 million people during the 20th century. It has helped almost wipe out polio, which in the 1980s paralyzed 350,000 people in 125 countries each year. One problem for the WHO, argue some, is that much of its work is invisible. It cooperates closely with governments and lets them take credit for its successes. When things go wrong, of course, it makes a convenient scapegoat, as President Trump has realized. Its response to COVID-19 has come under intense scrutiny, as it should, and critics say that the WHO declared the COVID-19 a public health emergency far too late. That could be because China withheld information about the novel outbreak. Lately, the WHO has helped to coordinate global efforts to find treatments and vaccine for COVID-19. It's working with drug funds to develop and safeguard the supply of medicines, and it is a key player in COVAX, which is a plan to distribute 2 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccine in 2021. Last May, the World Health Organization, who is WHO's decision-making forum, requested a full independent evaluation of the agency's response to the pandemic, as well as that of individual countries. And it will be published next year. But regardless of what its conclusions are, many of the WHO's weaknesses are already apparent, because the agency is severely underfunded, chronically over-mandated by member states, and weak by design. Joe Biden has promised that America would rejoin the WHO immediately should he win the presidency. So the bottom line, the WHO is not perfect, but it is vital, and the world needs a central health organization. COVID-19 does not respect national borders. We need to resist vaccine nationalism, according to the president of the WHO, and the tendency of countries to go it alone. And we need to strengthen, not weaken, the capacities of those institutions so they can do the job of making a vaccine available to all in a sensible, rational, and effective manner. So my vote is to keep the WHO, reform the WHO, and fix what needs fixing, and let the organization get on with its job, being the forum where countries cooperate on matters of health. So it's out there. And we have got to decide as a country, are we going to try to go it alone, or are we going to be part of a worldwide effort to contain these issues?
You know, it seems to me, Dick, that the United States, President Trump, jumped out of the WHO rather abruptly, given the history of this organization and our involvement and the level of funding that we provide. It was, I won't say it was a minor irritant, because there was some concern about the reporting on the origins of COVID-19. But I don't think anybody was winning gold stars for their performance in the early months of.
But part of it, I think, Pat, is structural. I mean, the WHO, the head of the WHO is a physician who's well and very highly respected. In fact, he was elected to his position in a secret ballot, which was the first time that had happened in the history of the World Health Organization. And Mr. Trump personally kind of blamed him for not doing things better and faster. But in reality, it was the Chinese that were involved in kind of covering up and playing down when, to quote somebody else, wanted to play it down so people didn't panic, right? And I think I agree with you that the response by the Trump administration was not a measured response in which somebody would issue a public paper saying, we have the following issues with the WHO and
Right.
we want reform. It was off the cuff and flipping and we're out of here. So
Yeah, I think the bill of goods was that the WHO was catering to Beijing's position on COVID and didn't pursue the facts as vigilantly as they should. But I agree with you that there are better ways to deal with some decisions by some individuals within an institution than to just bail out.
yeah, I mean, there's
And
no
you're
doubt in
right.
my mind.
The WHO is the Center for Disease Control for dozens and dozens of countries.
For the rest of the world almost, unless you're an
Yeah.
advanced country like Germany or Sweden or something of that sort, Japan. Yep.
So the
And we
announcement was
have
made.
incredible influence in that organization. I mean, we
Yeah.
provide, the largest chunk of the budget comes from us. And we, as I mentioned, we have 10% of the staffing there. So American doctors and physicians and epidemiologists are rotating in and out, taking our expertise, grabbing expertise from others. So it's a highly productive and synergistic kind of operation. And to just, say, I'm mad at you and I'm out of here and take my football and go home kind of
Yeah.
reminds me a little about Charlie Brownism or something, grabbing the football away from Lucy, I guess. Right?
Well, the Economist had an excellent article about the WHO this past week, and that
It did.
kind of precipitated our thinking on this as a good topic to cover. And they mentioned that the budget of the WHO, the annual budget, is $2.5 billion, which sounds like a lot of money, but in global healthcare, they mentioned that that's the size of a health department in a typical mid-sized American city, and only 20% of the money that the WHO gets is without that doesn't contain any sort of provisions for its use, that the WHO can decide how to dispense that money. And the rest of the money comes in drips and drabs from 3,000 organizations that put caveats on how that money is used. So,
Well, and a lot of this stuff, Pat, is focused. For example, the effort to eradicate polio from the planet. We're down to 2.5, maybe 3 countries where polio is still endemic. And, the goal has been to get rid of it in every country, just like smallpox was eradicated.
right.
So there's a tremendous amount of effort that's going in and funding that's going in to make that happen. Tuberculosis is still a scourge in many places in the
Yeah.
world. So a lot of this is earmarked money, and we pull out what's going to happen to those efforts to try to make the world a safer and healthier place.
Right. And meanwhile, the U.S. is also unilaterally funding some of those efforts, so it is going to get complicated.
Well, part of the problem, I mean, on the pandemic side, is we kind of took a decentralized approach internally within the United States relative to the virus. Basically, the federal government shoved off to the states saying, this is your problem, you need to fix it. Don't look to us, don't come to us for our stockpile kind of stuff. That set off a scramble for, California is bidding against Texas, is bidding against New York for protective equipment, for masks and things of this sort. There was no coordinated effort. Who really needs this stuff most, and moving it to the person who needs it, right? And that same thing can happen at the worldwide level as far as the vaccine is concerned. 170 some countries, so there are 193 members of the United Nations. 170 countries has signed up for this joint effort to produce the vaccine and to distribute the vaccine, which is, second step. Once you've got it, how do you get it to the people who need it most in a fair and effective and rational way? And so by not being part of that, the United States said, we're going to go it alone. We're going to get our own vaccine, and we're going to do what we need to do with it. And then if we have any left over, we'll think about the rest of the world. And that strikes at the heart of who we are in the minds of some, right? What kind of people are we? And it's going to be an ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really tough thing too. I think we talked about a couple of weeks ago. I think there's, at least from the polls, there's overwhelming American public sentiment to whatever vaccines we develop as a country, those first ought to go to Americans. And if the president, any president, didn't do that, there'd be some political risk to handing out vaccines that otherwise would have gone to Americans to, other people in the world. I understand the fairness argument, but I'm just saying there's a political aspect to it too.
Sure.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and the question is, we and one other country, I think it's China, Dick, that resisted getting involved in the COVAX effort to distribute vaccines.
My understanding is China has also said they're going to go it alone.
So we're outside the tent thinking that we're going to come up with, pull the rabbit out of the hat in this vaccine business. And there were efforts all around the world. Russia said they had it. And that seems to have dissipated into, yeah, right. But somebody, the Brits or somebody who's in COVAX or these other alignments could come up with it.
Yeah.
And then they're going to, say to the United States, if you look at this Pew Research study this week about how foreigners, people overseas look at the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Cooperation with the United States is not
plummeted, gone down.
Go ahead, Breck.
I just want to add one other thing you all mentioned, which I think is exactly right, that the WHO serves as sort of the CDC for the majority of countries across the world that don't have the resources to have their own public health department. And as well, though, it seems to me the WHO serves as kind of a moral whisper in the ear of developed countries with lots of resources like the United States, that when these things happen, that we need to do the right thing. They serve as sort of an organization that tries to convince those with resources to do the right thing on behalf of those without. And I think that's a valuable role for.
You're absolutely right, Rick.
Yeah, it's like the World Food Program,
for example, right? I mean, the United States stepped up and basically, with the WHO, took the lead in trying to control the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa, and did it successfully. If we hadn't been involved like we were, who knows how that might have spread, and how many thousands of people might have died. So, it's all in the self-interest.
You raised the question of vaccine distribution, and I'll just mention that a couple of weeks ago, we were involved in a 2-night presentation on COVID-19, and the keynote speaker on the first night was Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, and he gave really a masterful presentation on COVID-19, including what it's going to take to get the vaccine produced and distributed. And I commend that video to anyone who has any interest in. What we're all interested in is when and how the vaccine is going to get distributed. So
you're right on, Pat.
You can find that on our youtube.com/TNWAC channel on YouTube. A great presentation.
You got into a good discussion about, okay, so you got the vaccine, and you finally got enough little bottles to put it in, and then where do the billions of syringes come from that you need to actually inject this thing? And so the supply chain issues are incredibly complex.
Yeah, he laid it all out. There are 2 companies that have the technology to produce the bottles, and then there are not enough fill and finish plants. And these fill and finish plants, where they actually put the vaccine into those bottles that are hard to come by, have to be 100 times more sterile than a surgical ward in a hospital. So this is not flip the switch. What is it? Operation Warp Speed. They're gonna run into some meteors along the way.
Pat,
okay.
The one other thing I wanted to point out real quick, if it was okay, just as an interesting fact, as you mentioned, the annual budget is about $2.5 billion. And I believe this is right, that the US represents about 20% of that budget. But the UK is second, but third place in terms of the biggest contributor to the WHO is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And that is an indication to me of there's a lot of blame but among developed countries about not funding this in the way that it should be funded. And it's a shame the U.S. is pulling out, but it's also a shame that some of these other countries with lots of resources don't see the benefit of this.
Yeah, that's good to make that point. And I'll mention that in the news today was the passing of Bill Gates Sr., Bill Gates, the Microsoft founder's father, who was heavily involved in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He was a great philanthropist and will be missed on the scene of the foundation, I'm sure, in the direction that the foundation has set.
Throw in a brief plug. He was also a lifelong Rotarian, member of Rotary International. And those values of, is it the truth and is it fair to all concerned and is it build goodwill and better friendship, those values, I think he really passed on to his son. And, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is really doing good in the world and doing it well. So. Yeah,
well, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as Rotary and
Rotary's taking the lead on the polio thing.
Yeah, you talked about polio, and Rotary is up there at the top of organizations that have been instrumental in combating polio and other endemic diseases around the world.
Correct.
And I'll throw a plug your way, Ambassador Dick Bowers, that you were district governor of Rotary and led half of the state of Tennessee Rotary Club. So. You're certainly an example of the rest of us for service above self.
Thank you, former club president for Rotary, right? Pat?
We'll have to get Breck involved. Okay, let's move on around the world a little bit. We're going to talk about the troubles in the Mediterranean, and we talked a little bit about the Turks and the Greeks. And the collisions and what was going on in the Eastern Mediterranean. We're just going to step back a little bit and look, take a bigger view of what's going on around the Mediterranean basin. And, as you can see from the map here, the Mediterranean touches Asia, Europe, and Africa, and the number of countries that connect via this critical waterway. It's really like no other place in the world in terms of commerce and interaction between the different countries. We've kind of gotten beyond the refugee problem from Northern Africa and Asia towards Europe in terms of probably flattening the curve would be a better way to put it. In 2015, more than 1 million refugees from the Middle East and Africa crossed the Mediterranean into Europe. They were, refugees and migrants fleeing violence, economic decline, persecution by governments. But the numbers were down in 2018 to about 116,000. And we still see in the news reports about troubles. There was a fire set in a refugee camp in Greece on the Lesbos island that made homeless, I think, about 13,000 people. A couple of months ago, there was a ship that authorities in Malta asked to pick up refugees, and then they were not permitted to land in Italy, so they spent 60 days floating around waiting for a port to go to discharge these refugees. And somewhat flippantly, the former finance minister of Nigeria posed the question, what is Nigeria's second city? And she answered kind of with a laugh, London. So the flow of refugees continues, but it's not quite as troublesome as it had been. So refugees is one of the issues that we're concerned about. But in the news, to some extent, and it's hasn't really been front page news for Americans because the impact on American interest is not very severe. Even though we were involved in the start of the troubles, the United States and NATO countries participated in support of rebels overthrowing the regime of Muammar Gaddafi. And that touched off a rivalry between East and West. There's a government of national accord, and that's backed by most of Europe, Turkey, and Qatar. And then there are rebels under General Khalifa Haftar, and they control mostly in the east, based out of Benghazi. The government is in Tripoli, and Libya traditionally has been a tribal country where the east and the west had their own distinct leadership, but they were unified under the central government in Tripoli for many years. So you can see there that this is really a chaotic situation. Month by month, this map of areas of control goes back and forth. The Russians have dispatched mercenaries under this Wagner group that they deploy to places like Syria and parts of Africa. And these are their Russian contract soldiers. They've even dispatched MiG fighters to support General Haftar's and the LNA. But despite that, they've been pushed back by the government of national accord. So it's really a situation where there's no decisive outcome to be had, and it's probably time for the United Nations and European countries to get more involved in what's going on there. So that's one area of concern in the Mediterranean, and then we turn to the problem that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the relationship between Greece and Turkey, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We mentioned the oil exploration issues, but Greece and Turkey have for decades been conflictive over control of various parts of the Aegean Sea. In 1974, there was actually a war between factions on the island of Cyprus, and there still remains a line of control between the north and the main part of Cyprus. The northern part of Cyprus is controlled by Turkish-backed forces. The Aegean continues to be a disputed area, and now throw into the mix the pursuit of oil and gas. But you can see in this depiction here, this is, if you consider that the United Nations Conference on Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, UNCLOS, prescribes a 12-mile territorial limit for territories. You can see that the Greek islands impinge up against the Turkish mainland. So it's fairly, it's not inconceivable that there would be conflict between the two countries over control and the recognition of the parties' sovereignty in that area. And if you add to the fact that UNCLOS, the treaty, prescribes a 200-mile economic exclusion zone around sovereign territory, and that is not territorial seas, but it is economic control over the seabeds, the continental shelf, and mining and oil exploration and so forth. So turning again to, and we'll give a quick wrap up here and summarize what's going on in the news these days. The exploration of oil and gas, and there have been some major finds in the Eastern Mediterranean, and everyone is hustling to get their claims. And a lot of the demarcations between countries in the open seas were not clear. And recently, Greece and Egypt signed a deal where they have marked their territorial seas and economic exclusion zone, as you can see in that map. But around Cyprus, there are still conflicted zones, Turkey making certain claims. You can see in the center of that map an island called Castello Rizo. That is actually a Greek island, and you can see the red line there depicting the Greek sea claims right up against Turkey. So this is obviously an area where there's concerns between conflict. There was a collision between warships between Greece and Turkey. The French have been very forward-leaning in sending French warships to the area. The Turks, who are not part of the European Union, they're concerned about their sea claim, but the European Union wants to make sure that they've got access to especially gas that might be discovered in the area. So this is a continuing area of concern. And that small island, Castellarizo, you can see in this depiction, it's that red marker off the southern coast of Turkey. So you can see how close the Greek claims are to the Turkish mainland. The chart on the left is just a depiction of the UN Conference on Law of the Sea zone claims. And you can see there that territorial waters are 12 nautical miles from a territory. And then the contiguous zone is another 12 miles. So this is the area that the territorial waters are 12 nautical miles. But this EEZ, the economic exclusion zone, goes out to 200 miles. So this is the area where a country has sovereign control over the seabed and so forth. It's international waters, but which means that ships can sail through there, but no one can send a research ship like this one into someone else's EEZ. So with all these islands and claims, it's really a thorny issue, and something that we hope to see a little less confrontation over. I hope that wasn't too tedious, but just to point out that we've got some stormy waters in the Mediterranean.
Pat, I have
I
a
think
question.
you're on mute there. Go ahead, Breck.
Oh, so I had a question, Pat. Turkey's been in the news a lot over the last 12 to 24 months. And of course, it's a member of NATO, but it's been acting in ways that have not been collaborative in many instances with its NATO partners, like the buying the air defense system from Russia and going into Kurdish areas in Syria, as you just talked about, the Eastern Mediterranean. In your crystal ball, does Turkey remain a member of NATO over time, and is this sort of just not something that necessarily is going to foretell the future, or are these antagonisms going to continue?
I think they're going to continue. I don't see a major, people within the NATO community have been deeply disturbed by two things. You pointed out the acquisition of Russian hardware, and in particular the S-400 surface air defense system, which Turkey has been buying NATO configured equipment. The stuff that NATO uses is standardized among NATO nations, down to the bullets. It's a 7.62 NATO round in a long rifle, a long gun, up to surface-to-air missile systems. So these things are specified to NATO standards. So acquiring Russian equipment and trying to put that into a system of air defense around the country is a problem. It also opens the door to Russian technicians having access to Turkish air defense systems and cooperative NATO networks. So that's a significant issue. The other issue for NATO has been the fact that NATO is a security pact among democratic nations. And Turkey has been edging towards, pushing the edge of the envelope there. Mr. Erdogan has, in response to a coup, has locked up tens of thousands of military officers, professors. He's used it as a way to crack down on dissidents. So the democratic values of the Turkish government are waning to some extent, and that's a problem for NATO as well. but it would be complicated to expel Turkey from NATO. And I think Europeans would rather have Turkey connected. They don't want them to become part of the European Union because of the economic impact and migrant flows, et cetera. But to keep them in NATO probably provides a useful way to remain engaged in what's going on in Turkey. You're right. In the past couple of years, we've seen many examples where Turkey has acted in a way that was counter to interest in the West. And I think Erdogan has publicly pushed a position where he's not under the thrall of Western societies and has been moving to the East. He's made major allies with Qatar. Qatar, the Arab Gulf state that has problems with its own neighbors. Turkey has sent troops there to back up that government. So Erdogan is moving Turkey in a different direction than it had traditionally occupied in the decades where it was a bulwark of the southeast NATO flank against the potential for Soviet expansion. But I think we'll probably see it continue to antagonize its NATO partners, but not to the point where there's a major effort to expel it from NATO.
I agree, Pat. But I don't know in the long run how long the Turkish populace is going to stay with Erdogan. A lot of it had to do, I think, with the economic aspects of life was better for many, many Turks as a result of his economic policies. But
yeah,
I don't think I know a lot of Turks and they are not ready to become hardcore Muslim fanatics. So they want that connection to the West. But I think you're right. The idea of joining the European community is not on the table at all these days. So that's a dead issue.
Yeah, I don't think fanatics would be the right word. I think there's clearly a move in Turkish society under Erdogan to push back against the secular motivations of the government and the society and embrace Islam in a more direct way. We saw that with the transfer of the 1,000-year-old basilica, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, which had been a secular, basically a museum piece, an incredible piece of architecture that I've been privileged to pay a visit to, is now a mosque, and it's a functioning mosque 24/7, and some other architectural sites there that were treasures of the world have been turned back over to be used as mosques. So that's an internal decision, obviously, but clearly Erdogan is using Islam as a tool to his benefit.
All right.
Okay.
I think we hit them all three of them, right?
We
Those
did.
topics?
Yep. And we appreciate people.
I'm going to go watch a hippo eat a watermelon. That's
I'll send you the link.
Okay.
Well, first,
the algorithm will find me very quickly, I think, right?
Well, that probably will. Yeah, it should. It sure should.
Well, I can't top that. But let's take a look at the question of the week, and Breck has got an answer for us.
Right. The question was, Pat, which country followed the United Arab Emirates in its decision to normalize relations with Israel? And the answer is D, Bahrain.
Okay. And there on the map is Qatar, right next to Bahrain. It is kind of the thumb sticking up from Saudi Arabia, one of the 6 countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC. And currently Bahrain is, along with Saudi Arabia and Jordan and UAE, are at odds with Qatar over a number of issues. So that might be something else we cover in the news here in the future with the Global News Review. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming out today. Breck, batten down the hatches. We hope that the rain clears out and you have sunny skies for your return to Nashville.
Well,
And Dick,
thanks.
don't spend too much time with the hippo videos.
I'm sure there's something else on there, cuddly koala bears. I mean, whatever you would think of is on there probably. Huh? All right, guys, enjoyed it.
Enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Okay, we will see you, Breck, tomorrow evening in your program, Foreign Policy Challenges, Russia, North Korea, and Afghanistan. And again, a reminder to everyone, please take a look at tnwac.org for our calendar, our newsletter sign up, and please also consider becoming a member or making a gift to the World Affairs Council. That's it. Thank you, gentlemen. We will see you next week.
Thanks.